Well, I'm Megan Lutz. I'm the president of Central Street Neighbors Association, and I want to thank everybody for attending and thanking the candidates for coming to this forum. If you're not already a member of Central Street Neighbors and you want to find out more about us, you can go to centralstreetneighbors.com and find out about us. We also post kind of local news, hyper-local news. We have guest contributors who post things on the site, and you can sign up for membership there. I do want to announce that we have an event coming up on March 13th. We're doing a shredding event at the parking lot next to Ryan Field, so the Northwestern parking lot at the north end. And that is Saturday, March 13th from 9 a.m. to noon. You'll see we'll put a Central Street Neighbors sign at the corner of Central Street. But if you drive up, is that Ashland? Yeah, Ashland up to the north side of the parking lot, you'll see there will be a shredding truck there. You will be limited to 2 banker's boxes or 2 grocery bags. But we noticed that there really haven't been any shredding events, and so we decided to host one for our neighborhood. So we'll also post more detailed instructions on the Central Street Neighbors website. So with that, I would like to introduce Jeff Smith, who will be our moderator for this forum.
Thank you, Megan. Since Central Street Neighbors was founded in 2007, we've hosted a number of forums on different topics, but also during elections for candidates who otherwise might have difficulty getting their message out in races to which major media does not pay a whole lot of attention. We've been blessed with great participation by candidates over the years and with a fair amount of local attention. And we know there's a lot of other things competing for your bandwidth these days. So we thank everybody who takes the time to show up and weigh in or just watch. And we will have a recording of this available on our website, probably within 48 hours or less of it taking place. Our standard format is that we ask questions of the candidates that have come from the Central Street Neighbors Board, some submitted by folks via email or through direct messaging on the Central Street Neighbors website, and some from my own fevered brain. And it's the latter that are the challenge for the candidates, of course. You'll be limited to candidates to 1.5 minutes to respond, and there might be 30 seconds for rebuttal if there's something that needs to be extended because a candidate or their position has been called out. We expect to go to 8:30, isn't that correct, Megan? Or is it 9? Okay. And so we'll keep you an eye on the time. We ask all the candidates to be respectful of the time, because there's only so much for questions and answers, and to bring your remarks to a close when you see the impending signals from Megan. Okay? Any questions? Well, we have you each have the opportunity for now a 2-minute opening remark, to which there will be no rebuttals. And I will just take it in clockwise order as it appears on my screen, that being as random and fair as anything else that I can think of. So why don't we start off with Katie Trippy.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate an opportunity to speak with the Central Street Neighbors. My name is Katie Trippy, and my pronouns are she and hers. I am a 3rd-generation Evanstonian. I've lived in the 6th Ward for over 30 years. And I'm running to bring some better representation to the 6th Ward. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to serve on the City Council. If I am elected, I will be a 2nd-generation City Council member. My stepfather, James B. Moran, served on the City Council in the 1970s. And he was responsible for some incredibly positive changes that happened in Evanston during his time on the council, and I would like to follow in his footsteps. I've raised 3 kids here in Evanston. They have all attended Evanston Public Schools. They and I graduated from ETHS, and they are happily off in the world, successful. I am really interested in serving the 6th Ward as a representative on the City Council. And I really understand the importance of constituent service because I have worked on a congressional staff and on a gubernatorial staff and been that person that picks up the phone and helps to solve the problem. So I know how important that is, and I will be responsive and even proactive in any way that I can. I am really excited for what lays ahead in the coming years in terms of rebuilding our social and political structures. Thank you.
Our next candidate that we'll hear from is Mary Rosinski, running in the 7th Ward.
Hi, I'm Mary Rosinski. I'm a 30-year ward resident. I've lived in the same house in the 7th Ward, and I'm a 40-year real estate agent broker who's also worked on Evanston and the other North Shore communities. And I've raised 5 children here who have all attended and graduated from the Evanston School District. I've been actively involved in the Evanston community at many, many levels and given up and worked with just thousands of Evanston residents in the 7th Ward and throughout Evanston to build alliances to speak in front of City Council on behalf of a better government. I'm running at this point in time because over the last 8 years, there has been I've seen a gradual erosion of public trust, public confidence, and respect, and loss of respect for the residents. And I think that our residents are just too valuable and our city's too valuable to be not treated respectfully. I guess that's what I'd say. And I think that I'd like to see, no, I don't think, I do want to see long-term planning, which the city has not been, the council has not been able to do well. And our fiscal responsibility is critical. We pay high taxes in this city, and we need to make sure that our dollars are spent wisely and transparently. So I'm looking forward to representing my ward, my residents, many of who I've worked with, to preserve like the Lakefront Park, Northwestern Neighbors, the Evanston Public Library, Franz J. Coleman Foundation, and I think I'm done for now. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Mary. Our next candidate to introduce herself is Eleanor Revell, incumbent alderman in the 7th Ward.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you to Central Street Neighbors for this great opportunity to talk with your members. I'm a member as well. So I've lived in Evanston since the 1970s, and initially in the 1st Ward and now in the 7th Ward since 2003. My husband is a psychology professor at Northwestern, and our 2 children are proud graduates of Evanston High School. During my 5 years as alderman, I've drawn on the experience I have from working in a number of local organizations over the years. I was a founder of the Leadership Evanston, the Public Service Challenge. I was a founding board member of Citizen Screener Evanston, and I was president of the Evanston League of Women Voters and the Illinois League of Women Voters. And those have given me the skills and tools I need to evaluate policy proposals that come to City Council, and also to be able to listen carefully to all points of view to be able to reach a good decision. I'm really keen to continue for another 4 years because I have some unfinished business that I would like to continue to work on. I'm passionate about implementing our climate action and resilience plan. I'm really keen to finish working on developing an affordable housing plan for Evanston. And my 3rd priority is our alternative emergency response system program that I'd like to make sure we get implemented properly. Thank you.
Our final candidate to introduce himself is Tom Suffredin, incumbent Alderman for the 6th Ward. Welcome,
Thank you,
Tom.
Jeff. Appreciate it. So my name is Tom Suffredin. I've served as Alderman of the 6th Ward since 2017. My wife Claire and I both grew up here. We have 4 children, 3 that are nominally students at Willard right now, and a 3-year-old who is not. I have, in my time on the City Council, pushed back when necessary. I voted no on property tax increases. I voted no on increases to parking fees and fines. I voted no on amusement taxes. I voted no on increases in the sales tax. We need to accept the fact that Evanston is too expensive for many of our residents, and that goes across all income levels. We also cannot allow ourselves to put up with the situation where Wilmette and Skokie do things better. That's particularly an issue in the 6th Ward, where we border those communities. We have watched so many Evanston dollars go across Old Orchard Road to Walgreens, Tony's, and Schaefer's, and we haven't done anything on the top end on the west side of Central Street to attract business there. We need to work harder on that. We need economic development. I'm committed to working with our economic development staff to get our city through this COVID pandemic. I'm committed to maintaining our Central Street business district and looking for sound parking policies that make sense and acknowledge that we are competing with other communities that have free parking. I'm committed to working to restructure our public safety budget to reflect the values of our city. When it's been time to push back and tell our previous city manager that he needed to go because he was staying here at to the detriment of our citizens, I did that. When the current council decided that they were going to move forward with hiring a new city manager without public input, I called that out. I'll continue to advocate for the residents of my ward and the residents of Evanston in a way that's open and transparent and accountable.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for coming here tonight. For anybody watching, we did have a brief questionnaire so as not to go over some of the same points here that candidates could answer in print, and those are posted on our website. All 4 candidates were kind enough to submit responses to our relatively simple this time around questionnaire, and thank you guys for doing that. I'll start off with a relatively easy one, and if you can, try and keep your response to a minute, but you can go to a minute and a half if you want. Citizen comment is both a hallowed Evanston tradition and required under state law at open meetings. It used to be 5 minutes per person, period. Now there's a maximum collective time so that the more interesting a topic is to the public, the less anyone is allowed to say. You know how hard it is to say something in a minute. Try doing it in 30 seconds before the city council. Do we need to restrict further, such as moving to the end of city council meetings, or expand citizen comment? Are there ways that you would vote to change it in the way that it's being done, since it often seems unsatisfactory both to the public and the council? And why don't we start here with Tom?
Sure. Well, I think anytime that you have a framework where all participants involved think it doesn't work, then it's time to re-examine that framework. I think citizens are frustrated with the lack of time. I think council members, and I'll speak for myself, find it often not to be very productive. I think to your point, Jeff, maybe we could bifurcate city council public comment time where we have non-agenda items after we go through the agenda and agenda items addressed beforehand. I think there's also an element of agenda management that needs to be taken into consideration, because we can't have agendas where we have items that generate 75 public comments and tell everybody that they can have 38 seconds and expect there to be reasonable discourse there. So that's something to work on as well. I think the way that the rules are set up where there's no interaction is appropriate for council meetings, but there needs to be some acknowledgement that there should be times where there can be interaction. I'm hopeful that our new mayor and our relatively new city manager can work on a framework where perhaps we have one meeting a month on a Saturday, or we move some of these ceremonial things that take a lot of time on the front end of a meeting to one particular meeting. I think one of the frustrations that people have is that our council meetings don't have a set start time. They start 30 minutes after the previous committee and nobody knows when that is. So there are things that can be done. Jeff, I don't think restricting it is the answer, but I think perhaps having to be more focused in the context of each individual meeting is.
Thanks. Eleanor, and I'm going to ask all the other candidates, if you agree with something that's already been said, you don't have to repeat it, just sort of like the rules on citizen comment.
There we go. Right. Yeah. Well, certainly I can sympathize with the frustration of the public when they only get 30 seconds. On the other hand, we do want to not have public comment go on forever, because then the city council is there all night and we're trying to make decisions when it's way too late. So one thing that I think we could do, because I've heard a lot of people frustrated that we never answer their questions, so we could designate a staff person to compile answers to the questions that the residents have asked during public comment and make those available online for people to refer to afterwards. I think we want to maybe encourage residents to come to share their opinion about some of these really hot issues sooner than the time when it's coming up for a final vote on city council. Because by then, I think most of us have already been thinking about it for a long time, and we're pretty well have a pretty good idea of how we're going to vote. So I think it'd be more, citizens would have a greater chance of making an impact on our decision making if they contact us sooner. So maybe we need to look at something like that Tom kind of alluded to, of having an additional kind of meeting beforehand, particularly when we have these big, major development proposals and things that we know are going to be creating a lot of interest from our residents.
Thank you, Eleanor. Mary, you've been at you've participated in citizen comment from time to time.
Yeah, I'm what they call the usual suspect. I actually think that the citizen comment is critical. And I think that in the last 4 years, we've reduced it, and at Rules Committee, they cut it back. And I thought that was a complete disservice to the public, because the only reason we have council and the city is to represent our residents. And the fact that we have put the other meetings ahead of time only interferes with the city council meeting. We are the only city council, or the only public meeting for the on the shore that I'm aware of that doesn't start their meeting for the public at that time. Everyone else, you go to Northbrook, you go to Wilmette, Glencoe, Winnetka, they have their city meeting. It starts at that time. The planning meeting, those other meetings are held differently. Second of all, one of the reasons that the comments are getting so extensive is because people aren't finding stuff out ahead of time. And so they are getting it at the last moment. They're having to react to what they perceive as decisions that have already been predetermined. And then they're expected to get there. And then hundreds of people show up, and as it did with the Northwestern neighbors, and they give up an entire summer of their lives to get the city to comply with their zoning or their comprehensive plan, and then it's disregarded, and it's insane. It's absolutely insane. So I think that if we actually had transparency and followed our rules, we wouldn't have so many people showing up at council feeling that they haven't been heard. So I feel strongly about that.
Thank you. Katie?
I would say that we should look at some models of other progressive communities. One of the things that sets Evanston so apart is that we do have a lot of citizen participation. Everybody's got an opinion, and it is critically important that there be a forum for those ideas. And the current format of the citizen comment came out of the necessity that meetings not last till 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. But there has to be a way to make it work. And I absolutely agree there needs to be the ability to answer questions and respond to what a council member learns from their constituents or from others in those meetings, whether that be in written form by the city staff or directly responded to by the council member. It definitely needs to be revamped.
Thank you. Follow-up based on this discussion, just a show of hands, would any of you consider instituting a practice of having special meetings, setting aside a single topic when it's apparent that there's going to be one of these heater or controversial issues and you're going to have 75 people showing up, so that it can be done more orderly on a Saturday, for instance. Just yes or no, if you would
I
consider
would
it.
say yes.
Thank you. Okay, speaking of processes that some folks thought were preordained, and I'm not saying that they were or won't, the city manager selection process that we recently underwent was the subject of some discussion. Do you think that it was done fairly and wisely? Was it a good use of our funds, or should we have done something differently? And if elected or re-elected, would you want to revisit that decision? And why don't we start this one with Mary?
Yeah, that was an unfortunate show of our city government. That I think we promised the people we were going to have a public process, that they were going to have input and feel that they were represented. And then at the last moment for the mayor to suggest we just appoint, and some of the alder people to say, well, it doesn't matter who you bring forward, I'm going to stay with the city manager. And this has nothing to do with Erica's qualifications or not qualifications. What I think that what was so wrong about that was the fact that the people were about to be cut out by many members of this city council. And thank you, Tom, for standing up against that. And so I don't think it was in the end, it probably was a waste of money, because I don't know that it was ever really open and not predetermined ahead of time. But I thought the whole process was very poor. I don't know if I hope that answers your question.
Tom, what do you have to say about that process, and would you want to revisit it with a new council?
Thanks, Jeff. And also, I'll just answer, there's 2 questions in the Q&A box. Everybody raised their hands. Apparently that doesn't work really well with the way that this is set up. So everyone raised their hands when Jeff asked that question about setting aside special meetings for heater issues. So there were several points where the city manager search went wrong. And notwithstanding the pandemic, which we'll take that off the table, I think the selection of GovHR as the search firm was a mistake. I think that was rejected by Administration Public Works Committee and was resurrected by council members with an agenda. So that was the first misstep. I think moving to hire Erica Storley without a public process was another mistake. And I called that out at the meeting. And then we went through this public process. And then I think accelerating the public process and having citizen input and then a decision happen within 24 hours was another mistake. Overall, the process was bogus. Absolutely. I'll call that out every day, twice on Sunday. But now Erica Storley is the city manager. She is subject to annual performance reviews by members of the city council. That's the process. I don't think that it's productive for us to talk about revisiting it immediately when a new council is seated. I think she deserves a chance to do the job well, and the members of the city council have a responsibility to hold her accountable for her job performance. So revisiting it immediately, I would say, is not a good idea. But the annual performance review process needs to be open and transparent.
Katie, would you disagree with Tom, or and what metrics would you use to evaluate the city manager's performance?
Good question. I do disagree with Tom on this. I think that I was glad that the search committee the search firm was hired. We came up with 3 very good candidates. I was aware and attended a meeting where I was able to meet those candidates. And I think we came out with the very best candidate amongst the 3. And I'm glad that Erica is willing to serve this town. We are not the easiest place to manage. And I think Erica has done a tremendous job so far. I absolutely agree that it is the job of the council to hold her accountable for the job that she does and the performance of the rest of the city staff, which is absolutely excellent. And going forward, we will set specific goals and objectives that we will expect her to meet that are measurable. And just like every business and not-for-profit in town who evaluates their CEO, we'll do the same for Erica. And I'm sure that she will hold up to that, to those standards.
Eleanor, you were involved in this process. What are your thoughts?
Well, in hindsight, I do think it was a flawed process, and we should not have tried to make it look as though we didn't want to hear from the residents. So if I were to be able to redo it, I would make sure that we followed the process that we outlined at the very beginning. I do think the process ended up giving us 3 really excellent, well-qualified candidates to choose from. And I was particularly impressed by one of the ones that we did not choose. But ultimately, I did think that Erica was the best qualified, and especially to provide continuity as we were, struggling with the pandemic. So I regret really the bad taste that it left in our residents' mouths about the way the process was handled. I think that was created a bit of an unfortunate way for Erica to start her job as city manager. And then also I would echo what Katie just described as our role in holding the city manager accountable for implementing the policies that we set, and making sure, with this annual review that she's doing the job that we want her to do.
Thank you all for your answers. And I apologize if I'm being too informal by calling you by your first names. Would you prefer that I switch to your titles or Ms. here?
No,
you're fine. We're all friends here.
Right.
We're all friends. It's a small town. I think I've been in most of your living rooms, and if not, you've been in mine. So I'm going to switch to something that I don't think has come up in any mayoral or aldermanic debate that I've seen yet. Literacy scores for all Evanston children entering kindergarten have been declining, but there are gaps both before and during school age years that have an equity dimension. Is this an issue that, beyond what the schools can do, city government has the need and resources to address, and if so, how? And Katie, why don't you start off on this one?
Sure. I think those literacy scores should be a huge red flag to every member of this community. And I think the city should do whatever we have available to support all of our youngest and most vulnerable children with quality early childhood education. I think there are resources that the city can be spending and is already spending on those. But I think it's going to take the entire community coming together and saying, we need to have every child ready for kindergarten and ensure that that happens. So yes, we are incredibly wealthy with the number of not-for-profit organizations in this town that are also taking a look. I am proud to work for one of those. The McGaw YMCA has one of the largest early childhood education programs in Cook County, actually. So we can bring the not-for-profit, the for-profit, and the city government together to help to solve those problems.
Tom, I'm going to go to you second on this one. Is this an appropriate topic for city government, and do we have the resources to do it?
Sure. And I appreciate the question. We have one early childhood happening in our house right now. So I think it's really important that we be coordinated with our Parks and Recreation Department, our library, and our school district. That's really where the city's role here would be, I think, is to have coordinated programs that go across those 3 entities and 2 governments. So that is one of the things that the city does well but can do better, is coordinate with our schools. I think the other question, Jeff, is as we come out of this and people are more accustomed to being on devices, and we make sure that the digital divide is closed here, that we have free public Wi-Fi in the foreseeable future, that we have devices for children to use. In person is always better, but realistically, the transportation realities of getting children to places means that there's opportunities for us to take advantage of the technology that people have become more comfortable using in the last year if they have the opportunity to access it. So Jeff, I think there's a role for the city to play. I don't know that it's a primary role, and I don't know that it's necessarily a funding role, but it really is a problem that can be addressed by coordination across the library, the Parks and Recreation Department, and District 65.
Eleanor, would you agree with Tom on that basic approach?
Well, yes. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is the city has been an active partner and financial supporter of Cradle to Career from the very beginning. And that is a really wonderful collective way to bring the whole community together to work on exactly this issue of early childhood, those early years and the preparation for kindergarten. So I think and so we have several staff members who participate actively in various Cradle to Career committees and can help, direct some city resources and to this issue. So I think that's one way that we can continue to work to support our youngest children and make sure that they're ready for school when the time comes.
Thank you. Mary, is there something the city should be doing on this that it's not doing yet?
Well, I agree with actually everybody. It's a critical issue that the city needs to hold hands with the nonprofits and the schools and the libraries. One of the things when we were working for the libraries for 10 years to keep the branch system and expand it was we found study after study that said if our kids aren't reading by first grade, there's a good chance that this is going to happen. They're going to fall down. And if they're not by third grade, they're on the pipeline to prison. And by fifth grade, they're probably going to be touching base with the legal system. So one of the things about having library branches and not just someone coming to them is that third space where kids can go and feel safe. And I think we could still do that. We can work with the schools and the city. We can work with the library to have those places that are part of other places, but they need to be consistent. It can't just be this Thursday, because we also have to remember, I was a working mom with 5 kids. I couldn't go bring them someplace at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but they could walk home from school and visit the library, and they could do their homework, and they knew Connie and they knew the librarians. That helps, having that place that they can go and be safe. In Englewood, they started, before the police were there, they brought in a library to create that safe space. It's a community builder. So I would be inclined to get those groups together and say, let's co-space with stuff. And thank you.
Well, that leads right into another question that some of our viewers have had an interest in. Was closing North Branch the right decision? And if so, what would you do, if anything, to make up for that loss to the neighborhood? And if not, if you think it was the wrong decision, is there something that you would urge the city to do to rectify or undo that decision? Tom, I think I've shorted you on getting to go first, so why don't you take first crack at this one?
Sure. It was a decision of the library board. I found some of the rationale that they used to reach that decision to be inconsistent, but the reality is that it was not a decision that I, as the alderman, had any input on or influence over. So it is what it is. Here's what I would propose that we consider doing to replace some of what was lost. I had mentioned free public Wi-Fi. That's something that Luke Stowe, head of our IT department, is passionate about and is seeking funding for. I think it is reasonable to ask that Independence Park be at the front of the line for public Wi-Fi because that's really one of the gathering space elements of a library. And the reality as we move forward is it'll be less about books and more about access to the internet. So I think that if we could have Independence Park be an activated space with public Wi-Fi, that would be good. I also think, and this is an issue throughout the city for different reasons, but public restrooms at Independence Park would be a good idea, because that's another thing that was lost when the library went. There are no public restrooms on Central Street. There are a lot of areas of the city that need public restrooms for various reasons, for recreational purposes, for people experiencing homelessness. And as we try and look at what we're going to do with downtown and look at our business mix, we don't have the large stores with the bathrooms that people can use anymore. The public library downtown is the public bathroom for downtown. So the answer on the North Branch replacement, I think if we look at activating the space at Independence Park, free Wi-Fi and public restrooms, that replaces some of what was lost when that branch closed.
Mary, you've thought about libraries from time to time. Was it the right decision?
You know what? I worked 10 years with a group of people trying to keep the library branches open. We opened the free library at CAMS, which became, the Twig, which became CAMS. And one thing we found from the community is that they are valuable parts of the community. And so I don't think it was a great decision. I think it was, unfortunately, a decision that could have had other outcomes. I think we could have kept ours. There's so many ways that you can be creative and keep spaces. You just got to think outside the box. We could have done stuff in the library to bring in revenue. It's not about books. It's about being places. It's about learning. It's about learning how to use the internet and all this other stuff. And we have a building in the 5th Ward that Gibbs Morrison that we bought. We put $900,000 worth of money into that building without a plan. And it's been killing me for the last 10 years is why don't we have a library there? We talk about equity. We should have a branch library. And when I was working with the Buku people over there, kids were coming in all the time. I originally thought Buku was a city facility and they were studying after school and they had food to eat. And I think that we can go back and do something truly equitable. And I think we can work on getting our other branch libraries. I actually think, you should take the Robert Crown darn library, turn it into a restaurant, make that place really a super cool bar, and put another library over in that area closer to other people. I think libraries are important.
Eleanor, Tom said that, and correctly, that it's an independent decision of the library board. Nonetheless, we've all seen in the past few years where some city pressure was brought to bear on the library and some other issues. So do you think that was the right decision to close it? And what, if anything, would you do to make up for the loss or rectify?
Right. Well, first of all, I will say that the closing of the branch library generated probably the most emails that I ever have received as an alderman over my 5 years. I called every member of the library board to prior to their vote to urge them to consider keeping the space open. And I was hearing from residents who said, I can volunteer and I'll go in and I'll help, because that space was, was a city-owned building, and it wasn't like there was a big rent that needed to be paid. So ultimately, I think the board was already ready to make that decision, before I even called them. So moving on to the points that Tom has made, I think those are really great ideas to make Independence Park a community gathering area. And I think we need more public Wi-Fi in various places in the community, but certainly putting some in Independence Park would be a great step forward. And as Tom mentioned, we do need some public facilities in various parts of the community. So I think there's a lot that we can do without, to make up for losing that branch library.
Katie, as alderman, what would you do about the North Branch, if anything?
Well, it is a sad loss for our neighborhood, I have to say. I am really excited about the library at Robert Crown. I was there only one time before the pandemic kept me away. I did get some construction tours of it as it was going up. But I'm excited that there is a big, beautiful library in a more accessible neighborhood. And I think that's important. I know that the library decisions were made by responsible people who were not evil and did not wish ill on North Evanston or libraries in general. I think it's important that any decisions going forward be made with a lens of equity for the entire community in terms of locating other facilities. I do really support Tom's ideas for Independence Park. I agree that our Central Street community needs public bathroom facilities, public Wi-Fi. And I'm also excited about what can happen to that city-owned building. I would love to see a rooftop bar and restaurant go right on top of that library. I think there's a lot of exciting things that can happen both on that part of Central Street and down on the western part of Central Street in the 6th Ward.
The pandemic indeed did affect a lot of things during and continues to. The Orrington Hotel is apparently filing for bankruptcy. The Century Theater, which is a major business magnet for Evanston, has closed, and at least 70 other Evanston businesses have shut their doors, with at least 40 being attributed to the lockdown. And during this, inequity by any measure, or by many measures, let me say, has increased nationally, and Evanston has not escaped that. Is there anything that we should do differently if we face a similar public health issue going forwards? And Eleanor, why don't you lead off on this?
I'm not quite sure about your question, what we should do differently about a different pandemic, or?
Well, did we handle this as well as we could with respect to the balance of the economy, inequity, and public health? Is there something we should be doing differently to prepare for some virus unknown that might be coming down the road?
Well, just to focus on the health piece, I mean, I do think we've done a really good job in delivering the message to the community about how everybody should be keeping themselves safe and their fellow residents safe. And I think we're doing a really good job with our vaccination program. So certainly the experience we have in protecting our residents and getting them vaccinated as expeditiously as possible will certainly stand us in good stead should we have another event like this. I certainly hope this is a once in a lifetime thing for all of us. So I'm still not quite sure about your question. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll go to Katie next. Between the Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear of balancing, Governor Pritzker said he would never put economy ahead of human lives. However, economies have effects on human lives. People have lost their jobs. People are struggling. Did Evanston hit the sweet spot? Did we do everything Mama Bear perfect, or did we err one way or the other on the side of underreaction, overreaction?
I love your questions, Jeff. I just love the way you ask them. I always expect like 6 different layers. I think with regard to this pandemic, we have done the best that we could possibly do, considering the lack of leadership coming from the federal government. And you know, now we're in the vaccine rollout, and Evanston is set. The YMCA has been set to be a vaccine site for about 6 weeks. But the vaccine isn't actually being delivered to the city. And so the Levy Center has been a great location for that. I think we're doing the best we can do. One of the things that the next council is going to have to make sure that the city staff is on top of is grabbing every single possible federal and state dollar for relief from this pandemic that comes down and is possible to come to Evanston. That's our fiscal responsibility. In terms of enforcing restaurant and bar closings and things like that. I think we did the best that we could possibly do. And we have to be careful as it's time now to begin to open up.
Tom, same question to you, and with the same levels of complexity or ambiguity, you can do with it what you want to do.
I appreciate it, Jeff, and I think I know what you're driving at. I mean, one of the things that was exposed by this pandemic all over the place, particularly downtown Evanston, was how derivative our revenue structure is. I mean, if people aren't parking and people aren't buying, we aren't getting fees, we aren't getting taxes that we've been so reliant on. I have some friends who own restaurants, and just seeing the year-over-year taxes that they remitted and what a hit that was to our entire economy showed that we're very vulnerable to that type of stoppage. So I guess your question, if I'm understanding it, Jeff, is how do we build a local economy that's more resilient in the face of this type of situation? And I think there's some challenges there in terms of how we do taxation. That's a statewide issue in terms of what can be taxed and what can't. I think, downtown, with all the vacancies that we're gonna be experiencing, our real triage emergency situation is going to be getting our economic development people to find ways to fill them and do it in a way that's sustainable, and have the city support those businesses in whatever way they need to be supported. And that's one of the issues. There's much like personal health, right? The pre-existing conditions of individual businesses were exposed, but there's also the public health aspect of what does our city do that makes it harder for business to be conducted downtown, and what are ways that we can improve on that. I think I will be real quick, Megan. I see the stop sign. The new office buildings that are being constructed will have an advantage that they will be constructed in a way where we are aware of the needs brought about by this pandemic. And I think Evanston will be a more inviting place for businesses who may not want to locate in downtown Chicago. We are going to be a great alternative.
Mary, is there anything we should be doing different to prepare, and how do we tell whether we should go into these types of measures, whether something's going to be a COVID-19 or is more like a West Nile, where I think nobody would suggest that we go into lockdown?
I don't know that we can predict. I think we can be prepared based on what we've just gone through for things. I think now it's been unfortunate because we've had to learn, do we close streets? Do we, help restaurants get the heaters they need, or the small houses? I do a lot of work also up in Glencoe, and I noticed that the restaurants, it was always really vibrant up there with all the restaurants, and they had all the little houses and the little igloos, and the stores were being very, they were open and people were doing stuff. So I think what we need to do is I don't think we were unprepared. I'm not faulting us. I don't think we knew what we were walking into, but I think we can learn from where we were at and look at who did it the best. There were businesses lost all over the place. I think one of the things that hurt us was the fact that we are so heavy in bars and restaurants. And so we didn't have anything else to bring people really downtown to. And with the movie theaters going, I was kind of hoping we would get an entrepreneur or someone who has this big vision that would turn all those theaters into different types of theaters that different venues could rent out. And so we would be a destination place with, you could have movies in some of them, you could have children's theater, or you could have a lecture series going on and whatever, and then just keep bringing Evanston people into town. But I think we have to just look and be prepared. If it happens again, do we have the PPE? Oh, I'm sorry. And do we have are we ready to shut down and have the streets open instead of the stores?
Thank you. Speaking of things being shut down, it's now 2.5 years since an overwhelming majority of Evanston voters said we should protect the Harley Clark buildings and grounds from demolition and preserve them for use and access as public property, but they remain closed with absolutely no improvement during the term of this council, unless I'm mistaken. Staff recommendations on a lease are supposed to be made public tomorrow, I believe. Should this lame duck council be the one to make the decision on a lease, given the inaction over the last 4 years? And what is your, what would you do as alderman in the next 4 years to try and enact the will of the voters as expressed in the referendum? And Eleanor, you worked on a committee on this, so I'll let you lead off.
Okay, thank you. It is one of my topics. We are going to be getting a report from staff at the Monday council meeting, evaluating the 4 proposals and particularly looking at the addendums that each proposer submitted, updates with their business plans. I don't expect the council to make a decision, yes or no, about, which, to vote to sign a lease with any one of them on Monday night. I do think it should be up to the next council. I'm firmly committed to making sure that we do enter into a lease with one of the groups. I was obviously hugely disappointed that we let the Lake House and Gardens idea go by the wayside. So it is too bad that it's taken so long to get where we are. I think the pandemic threw a real wrench into being able to hear from the proposers and have the kind of interaction with them that we would have liked to have had earlier, which might have been able to expedite this so we could have had a decision by now. But anyway, I would expect that the next council will be able to make a decision very promptly, since we will have all the information at hand and ready for a real decision.
Mary, what are your thoughts on the Harley Clark process, past and present, and in particular, should this council be acting on a lease?
Well, back in 2013, we saved that building from turning into a hotel with a 3-story addition covering the parking lot. So I'm really glad that was not privatized and those 2.5 acres did not get sold in addition to the Harley Clark. I think this council should not do it. They haven't had the will to do something positive with it in the last 4 years. And I think that they should leave it up to the next council. One thing I will say is that the people in this town are amazing. And I would love to see the next council get behind the people and let them take it away. We have the will, and there's 2 great proposals, possible 3rd one out there that involve keeping this only lakefront place for the public on the lake for public use. And I think it's critical that we value our assets in real estate. When I tell people in the other communities that we're even contemplating tearing it down or taking down a public building on the lake, everyone goes, why would you do that? You will never get that back. I mean, just real estate, we have to quit, buying high and selling low. We need to keep our assets, and we need to keep our assets for the people. So I think the next council maybe more have the will to do that.
Katie, I think most of many 6th and 7th Ward residents have had the benefit of seeing what Tom and Eleanor and Mary have had to say on Harley Clark over the past few years. Have you looked at the current proposals, and do you have a feeling about any one or 2 of them in particular?
I have not had the opportunity to look closely at these 4 specific ones. I'm excited for any one of them, and I honestly hope that this council will act on it, because I think it's a crime that it has been carried on for so long. It's been Evanston dithering at its best. I have to say that I was a proponent of the Jennifer Pritzker plan to privatize it and monitor and bring some money into the city that we desperately need. It would be going back on the tax rolls and bringing in whatever hotel, bed and breakfast taxes. And I'm sorry to see that there has been absolutely no positive financial gain for the city over how long has it been? 4 years at least that this has been going on. I absolutely understand the importance of the public facility. We've got a beautiful lakefront. And like I said, there's water under the bridge. I'm excited for what these next 4 proposals are going to show, and I will definitely take a stand on one of them should it come to my city council.
All right. It looks like Jeff disappeared.
What happened to
So I'm gonna go ahead and
Yes.
take my turn, if that's all right with me. I think there's a couple of things, and this touches on something that we started discussing. I think the original Lake House and Gardens proposal at the beginning of this council's term, I think that group got hosed. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. Eleanor, you and I, that was my introduction to being on 7-2 votes. You and I did what we could to represent the interests of our constituents. I think to go from where we had some contractual details to be worked out to like, never mind, we're tearing this thing down, is something that contributed to the lack of trust in government. And that's just a little bit of the history. I respectfully disagree with Eleanor in terms of who should make this decision. I think one of the things that looking back on the last 4 years, having it carry over to a new council was problematic. Having said that, I have not seen the staff evaluations of the proposals. That's one of those things from the first question where we talk about making our public comment process better. I don't think that this issue should be a Thursday to Monday turnaround. Those proposals should be public and people should have a chance to review them. I think that could be a 2-week process, but here we are with our meeting schedule what it is, and we're up against the end of this council. So I can't make a fully informed statement on the staff evaluation of the proposals, but I think it is appropriate for this council to make the decision. And I think we got to just go in a direction. And I also think it's very important as we parse the results of that referendum to remember that at little and no cost to the taxpayer was one of the components that led to that getting as many votes as it did. So I look forward to seeing it all when it comes out, and I look forward to discussing it on Monday.
So it looks like Jeff did drop off. He's trying to get back on. There is a question in the chat. Do we get enough support from Northwestern? If not, what more could Northwestern do for Evanston? And I'll start with Katie on this one.
Sure. I have to say that I've seen a great improvement in the relationship between Northwestern and the city since Morty Shapiro has become president of Northwestern. I don't know if you remember this, but Liz Tisdall, Morty Shapiro, and Dr. Weatherspoon at ETHS all came to Evanston in the same month. And the 3 of them traveled around this town together to every forum and event that they could possibly get to. And I think for a relationship that has served all 3 entities incredibly well. I am pleased to see the good neighbor checks have continued. I think that their generosity when they didn't have to be generous, the courts have said they don't have to be that generous. And is there more that they can do? Absolutely. It was raised at the city council a couple of weeks back that there is a specific bill for fire services that calls that were made specifically to the campus, and there was a dollar amount attached to it. And I think Northwestern should be responsible for any direct city services that they use and should pay for things like that.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to take over this question? Do we get enough support from Northwestern? And if not, what more could Northwestern do? So Katie's answered, so you can take it from there.
Sure. Mary, why don't you follow up on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We need more money from Northwestern. I think we're a host city. They are here, but they have 242 acres of our most expensive land. And by today's standard, that land, if that weren't Northwestern, I'm not saying they should go because I actually like having a university town, so don't get me wrong on that, would generate close to $40 million in taxes. So I'm not saying that they should pay 40 million. I'm just saying they should pay their fair share, and that the city services that they and their students use are more than just $1 million or dollars a year. And it comes with strings attached, and a lot of it ends up at Northwestern. So I think we need to have a really honest discussion about this. Harvard pays like 10 million a year. Penn State just gave 18 million. Boston gives like 2 or 3 million. I mean, every other private university with Northwestern is the bottom of the line, contributing to their host cities. So I'm just saying there's other things that could happen there. And this council and the previous councils have never pushed on it. And I think that we can have a healthier relationship. And I think last year, 2 years ago, we gave them commercial zoning to have commercial events on 42 acres of untaxed property. That's worth millions of dollars. And we got nothing back except for maybe $160,000 in sales tax we would get anyway. 5 neighborhoods fought that all summer long. They gave up all their time, and the city council just threw out the zoning code and they threw out the comprehensive plan. Not everybody, because I know Tom and Eleanor. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, thank you for, you can finish a sentence when you need to.
But that's up this year. And I think someone needs to explain to our fellow council members the importance of zoning and comprehensive plans and why you don't want to throw it out the window when you are dealing with people. You need to negotiate.
Tom, do you believe that the council or the city has been overly deferential to Northwestern? And if so, how do you maintain good relationships with the largest economic driver in the city, yet get what the city needs from them?
Yeah, so I think with the election of a new mayor and the possible installation of a new president at some point in the future, the foreseeable future, there's an opportunity to recalibrate the relationship. I think, and I'll just use the Lincoln Street Beach as an example. We've seen times where the city should be more aggressive in pushing back, and for whatever reason, we haven't had the will to do it. And that's what happens. You get the university claiming a beach that's not theirs, or when they come to us, we have leverage points. I mean, I know it's very like empty political calories to say, you know what, Northwestern should pay taxes and that's how it should be, and this is bogus. And it's all true, but we can't force them to pay taxes. But when they come to us with something that they want, we could tell them, hey, that's great. Here's some things that we want. And that's the time when we should negotiate. And to Mary's point, I think that we missed an opportunity with things at Welsh Ryan Arena. I think there'll be more opportunities to come forward. I think Northwestern likely wants to be a partner with the city. I think they're going to push back if we make a proposal on a payment in lieu of taxes, but I don't think that should dissuade us from bringing it up at every opportunity. I think, Jeff, the relationship can be, we can have disagreements without being necessarily antagonistic, but we need to be clear that they are not contributing what they should based on what they use. And I commend Alderman Rainey for bringing up the very specific issue of fire service, because that's one where it's like there is a precise number that they should be remitting. And I see a stop sign, but I'll point out, the protests over the Northwestern Police Department could have been a lot less destructive if the president of Northwestern University's reaction wasn't, you're not going to get what you want, go ahead and destroy the town for 30 days. So we need to have a relationship where that type of thing doesn't happen. And I think the new mayor is going to set that tone very early in his administration.
Thank you, Tom. Eleanor, I think you're the only one who hasn't gotten to answer on this. And if you could follow up on Tom's point about oversight and points of leverage. Am I incorrect in thinking that the city has actually backed off some of its oversight and that Northwestern is not now subject to design and review committee before it puts up things on the Lakeville? Are we? And I could be wrong on that, but that was my sense of a not highly publicized discussion. Anyway, what should, if anything, should we be doing? Should we be exercising any leverage at all against Northwestern?
Well, I haven't heard this issue about design and project review backing off or anything. So I'm going to leave that for another day, I guess. I would agree with Katie about, that when Morty showed up and Liz took over as mayor, and they had an opportunity to kind of reset the dialogue with Northwestern. And I think what we need to do now is continue to maybe reset it again. We know, for example, what dollar amounts Northwestern generates for the city, permit fees and sales taxes and athletic contest taxes, et cetera. Northwestern also provides a number of non-monetary contributions. Kellogg provides entrepreneurial support to small businesses. They do a lot over at the high school. And so what we could do is sit down with Northwestern and say, okay, let's assign a dollar value to those non-monetary contributions. Let's add it all up and then say, let's set a goal for how we can increase the amount that you are going to be providing to the city. And so work with them to set some new goals that will bring more resources into the city, in addition to getting them to pay for our fire services that they do already use.
Thank you. Equity has been a big word, at least on campaign signs. My question is, how will we know, if ever, when equity has been achieved? How do we make
Uh-oh. He froze.
Yeah, it looks like maybe we lost Jeff again. Well, let me try to figure out where he's going with that. So, how will we know when equity is achieved, and how is equity part of your plan for city council? And let's start with Mary on that one.
That's a really good question. How do you know when equity's been achieved? And I think the first thing is when you know that every decision that's going on is done without bias. And that's almost unattainable, because we all carry bias within us. But it's how we spend our money. It starts with our budget. Our budget, as everyone has been saying, our budget's our moral document, and how we allocate the resources is how you determine what you're really valuing. So then we go to, where are those monies going? And do we have jobs training? And with the most vulnerable, are they being serviced equally as very top people in our city? So I think it starts with, programs that you need. It starts with affordable housing. It starts with, is your community truly diverse? Who's managing, who's making the decisions, and who's at the table, and at what point are they part of the table? I think that's a huge spot. And I think we just got to continue to work on it. And it's, we're sitting here with 6 white people. I mean, that's equity, but equity isn't just about color. It's about religion. It's about culture. It's about age. It's very everywhere. So I think we just need to continue with the conversation. And I don't know when we'll know that. I feel like we'll know when we're there, when we have to stop talking about it.
Tom, do you want to give us your views on that?
Well, I think, in terms of when we get there, everything has to be specific and measurable. That's the only way we're going to know if we're doing it right or doing it wrong. So one of the things that we need to make sure is that things are specific and measurable, and we can show where we're falling short and where we're succeeding, and hopefully where we're exceeding our goals and metrics. So that's one thing. Another thing that I would like to see the next council implement is the inclusion of equity notes on ordinances that are passed, and have that be a consideration that's part of the document as the council considers ordinances. Another note that would be appropriate on a lot of things is our CARP notes. We have, and affordability notes. I mean, we have these stated goals. We put them on a poster in the Civic Center, and we've claimed that they're very important to us, but we don't do an adequate job of measuring incremental progress and deciding or acknowledging whether or not individual decisions that we make get us closer or farther or are neutral to those goals. And I think that's something that we need to look at when we look at raising any sorts of fees or taxes, when we look at any sort of service cuts or service increases, having the equity note attached to any ordinances is one way that we can make sure that we're doing it. And then to Mary's point, equity isn't about Katie Trippy, Tom Sufferton, Mary Rosinski, and Eleanor Revell patting ourselves on the back about what a great job we're doing. The measure is really from the people that are supposed to be served by the things that we do. And that's the scoreboard that really matters. It's not external validation. It's internal validation and being willing to admit when we're wrong and move forward.
Thank you. Eleanor, do you want to take it next?
Sure. Well, I agree both with Tom and Mary. I think, first of all, I doubt that we're in our lifetime on council anyway, that we're going to have achieved equity to the fullest extent that we really want to do. I like the idea of marking in our ordinances how each ordinance that we pass is advancing our equity goals and our affordability goals. There's one thing that we haven't mentioned is our recent environmental justice resolution. It has three parts, and one part is that that we shall have meaningful involvement in residents in decisions that affect them. And I think that's one way that we can do that with all of our major decisions, make sure that we create an opportunity for residents to tell us how a particular decision is affecting them. And we'll get a better sense that way of whether the decisions that we're making are advancing our equity goals. I had something else, but it's gone. Sorry. Go ahead.
Has everybody answered on that?
No, I haven't answered yet.
I didn't think
so. Can I go ahead? One of the joys of working for the McGaw YMCA is that we are, as a staff, trained in diversity and equity, and I have been able to personally take advantage of trainings through the Y, but also through the city and throughout the country, actually. And what I know is that the journey toward equity is a continuum. It is not a destination, and we will know that we're making progress on that continuum when the people who have been denied equity agree that we are making progress. And so we have to constantly check in, and the progress that Evanston as a city has made by specifically hiring a diversity and equity specialist is to be commended. We are progressive in our thinking and our acceptance of the need for this type of work, and we actually are outstanding in our adoption of the environmental justice resolution. It is so important that we keep that lens of equity in every aspect as we legislate.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for my intermittent disappearance. We don't have a perfect technological world, apparently. We'll go from the aspirational to perhaps the more prosaic. The mayor-elect has called for, in his campaign, for a, quote, complete overhaul, unquote, of Evanston zoning. And if you look at the Evanston zoning map, we've got 7 basic types of zoning districts, and they're literally all over the place. Do you agree with the Mayor-elect Biss, and why or why not? And what would be the main things you would want to come out of such an overhaul? Why don't we start with you, Katie?
Sure. I am willing to listen to the mayor-elect, to his ideas for revamping zoning. It feels like zoning has been a topic of conversation my entire life here in Evanston. I think there are a lot of social equities that can be achieved through zoning, a lot of environmental equities that can be achieved through zoning. So yes, I'm willing to entertain the conversation as long as we have a very large table with many, many voices present.
Is there a particular district type or a map or text amendment that you're looking at, Katie, to change?
No, I don't have a particular opinion on that yet. I may later, but no.
Tom, why don't you follow up as the other candidate from the 6th Ward?
Sure. Since you put it in the context of Mayor-elect Biss's platform, which I'm somewhat familiar with, one of his largest things is the R1 zoning and finding ways to have fewer areas that are zoned R1. Right now, across the alley from the house I live in, we have a very tall single-family home being built. And so, the same square footage could accommodate 3 units if zoning allowed for that. And as we talk about, the generational transfer of wealth tied to real estate in the context of a reparations program, one of the things that Evanstonians aspire to is to be able to age in place and live in structures that meet their needs at various points of their lives. And that we disallow construction of some of those things through R1 zoning. So I think that is something that the mayor will drive and that is worthy of discussion. I think, overall, the issue of affordability, which is much larger than the 30 seconds I have left to answer this question, can be solved, in the 6th Ward in particular, where we're fundamentally built up, although there are some exciting opportunities on the west end of the ward for development forthcoming. The accessory dwelling unit, the peeling back of R1, and the encouragement of different types of construction are all worthy discussion. And if we're serious about affordability, are probably something that we need to take very seriously and get going on very early in the next council and mayor's term.
I'm going to exercise a little prerogative here and try and get a clarification from you, Tom. Are you saying that you would be in favor of a change to R1, but you're not advocating for increasing the mass and bulk on lots?
I think what we need to look at, and again, I'm using an example that none of you are familiar with across the alley, which is happening on Hastings, right? That house is being built and it's the size that would allow for 2 or 3 units without changing any other components of the neighborhood. The garage would be the same size, the building would be the same size. So I think that's the starting point. If we want to talk about building bigger on these residential streets, that's a larger discussion, and I don't know that I have all the information in this forum to say whether or not it's a good idea. But I think if we want affordability, we need more units and different types of housing. So Jeff, I'm open to looking at it. And I since you asked in the context of Mayor-elect Biss's priorities, I think he will be the real driver of putting that out there. And so I look forward to working with him and having a robust public discussion about this issue.
Well, at the risk of being unfair, I'm going to take it to a higher level with Alderman Revell. Many of us worked on a number of zoning issues, and from experience, I can tell you that just the discussion on changing the rules about gables and dormers took up many, many, many months. So when somebody says they want to completely overhaul the entire zoning code, those of us who work in zoning sometimes kind of blanch at the prospect. But Eleanor, do you agree that we need a complete overhaul or just a tweak in some places? And what would be the main things you would want to see changed in zoning, if anything?
Right. I do think we need probably a complete overhaul of our zoning code, and particularly we should do it with an equity and an affordability lens, and we can get at some of the issues that Tom has just mentioned. I think this is going to be one of the key recommendations that's going to come out of the Affordable Housing Plan Steering Committee when we finally are able to finish that affordable housing plan. We need to amend our zoning code to allow more types of houses, smaller types of houses, smaller lot sizes in all residential districts so that we can have affordable housing in all parts of Evanston. Because right now our zoning code is a pretty exclusive document, and kind of building on Tom's example of the house that's going on across the alley from him, I think some of those really large houses that you see in East Evanston, where were built for families with multiple children, and the families today are much smaller. We could take some of those big houses and make them into a home for 2 families or 3 families, and you wouldn't even change the look of the neighborhood. But the zoning would have to allow that. So I do think a complete overhaul of the zoning code is probably what we need to do.
Mary, do you agree or disagree? And specifically, I'll play devil's advocate and say I'm somebody who's invested in my neighborhood, and I've paid a mortgage, and now I've managed to pay off most of it. And like most Americans, say that most of my what I've saved up in my entire life is in my real estate. And is it fair to suddenly change the rules of the neighborhood that I bought into and say we're going to change the zoning? Do we need an overhaul or just tweaks? What are your thoughts?
Well, now you're in my world. And so much of real estate is about zoning, and it's about what people are buying and what they're expecting. And when you say a complete overhaul, 90 seconds can't even begin to attack this question, or the affordable housing. I think it needs to be put out on the table with intelligent discussion. And I've always felt that there needs to be tweaking, because I happen to have always liked the idea of coach houses, because the taxes in this town are way too high, and it could be a way that people could stay in their own houses. On the other hand, we have to, we started with the Central Street master plan. We got that done. I mean, it took us a whole year practically to get that codified in the city so that people could buy near something that they could understand. People's houses, their apartments, their condos, they're usually the most expensive asset they have. So, and I have no illusion that changing zoning to allow 3 buildings and super density is going to create affordable housing. You just have to take a step down to Wrigleyville. I mean, those things are $1 million. So it's a much more complicated thing. I am for it. I'm for looking at it, seeing how do we make this so that the quality of life stays relatively where people want it. More density is fine, but higher density, more congestion doesn't make a better life, and it doesn't make things more affordable. And I think we need to be looking at all that together in one big picture and at one table. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that we're running up against the hour and a half mark here. We maybe have time for one very, very short question. With regard to transportation, is there one thing you can suggest, each of you, and let's try and keep it to a minute here, that the city can be doing to get people out of cars and making more use of walking, biking, and public transit? Or should that even be something that we're aspiring to do, and should we leave that to individual choice? Mary, I'll let you lead on that.
Actually, I like that question a lot. Thank you. Yeah, I think that one thing, if we had a lot of money, and I think there is money in this budget, I would actually have electric buses going east and west and north and south to allow people to get to all parts of the city without having to get in their car. Because I can tell you right now, I would do it in a second. And then that, along with the bike lanes, would be really good. And then we wouldn't have to have as many cars. But I know I have friends, that are going to the Levy Center, but there's a bus twice a week. And after high school, the kids couldn't get home after 4:30 because there was no transportation. So you had this line of parents picking their kids up after sports. I think we can do that. I think we can do a lot. I think we can do with public transportation. I think it can be ecological, and I think we can hit all parts of the city and actually probably help our economy at the same time.
Thanks, Mary. Tom, do you have one good idea on what we can be doing, if anything?
Specific to the 6th Ward, Grosse Pointe, Central, and Crawford is our ridge in Emerson and Green Bay. We need to fix that. And that is one of the reasons why I proposed a TIF study. I mentioned the potential for new development on the Wilmette border and where the Unity Church is. I think one of the things that we can do is fix that infrastructure, get complete sidewalks all the way to Hillside Church, at least ideally all the way to the Wilmette border. and have a more pedestrian-friendly experience and have that triangle work better and be more compatible with different modes of transportation.
Thank you, Tom. Katie?
I would absolutely agree with Tom about that western portion of Central Street being reconfigured to be more pedestrian friendly. But I would also like to see Evanston's downtown become more pedestrian friendly. I think that we could put some breaks in the north-south streets. Sherman and Orrington could be cut off in certain places so that we have almost a full square block of, in addition to what we have in Fountain Square, for that type of thing. And again, it helps us, helps our restaurants to continue their businesses when if there's another pandemic, or if they just want to extend their outdoor dining. I think making a destination pleasant for people to walk to and walk around is one of the most important things we can do for our health and for our economy.
And just to follow up, Katie, the North Evanston, in particular, the 6th Ward with Three Crowns, Westminster, and Alden has one of the highest concentrations of senior citizens in the entire city. Walking around isn't practical for many folks, not to stereotype, but there's no bus service here on Sunday at all. What can we do to make transportation more senior friendly?
Well, that's a really important thing, because aging in place, I think, is one of our priorities. I know that when I sold my house 2 years ago and started looking for a condo, I really spent a lot of time looking outside of Evanston because of transportation, because of affordability and all of that. Luckily, I found a condo on Central Street that meets all of my needs. I have a bus that runs by my front door every single day. But I absolutely agree, we need to improve especially our east-west connectivity. I love the idea of electric buses, and I think we can do better. We have such a great platform on which to build, with the L running, the L and the Metro running north and south for us. I think we can build even better.
Eleanor, you've worked on some green and transportation issues, I think, from time to time. What's one great thing we can do in the next 4 years to get folks using more active transportation?
Well, I'm going to say two things. So I really like the idea of electric buses and improving the frequency that they and the streets that they run on. One that we haven't mentioned, it came up at the Transportation and Parking Committee, is we need a north-south bus on Dodge on Sundays. So we don't, so we spent a lot of time talking about that, but it turns out to be a resource issue, of course. Then the other thing I hear about from residents is the quality condition of our sidewalks, and people who want to go out and walk, and they, the sidewalks are uneven, and tree stumps are growing in the middle, and so our program relies on residents to pay 50% of the sidewalk repair cost, and so I think we need to come up with a way to be able to fix those sidewalks without having to rely on the homeowner to get around to deciding they can afford to help fix that sidewalk.
Thank you.
Can I add to Eleanor?
Yes.
And Eleanor, thank you for bringing that up, because the other thing that does, when we talk about accessibility, a friend of mine who had a spinal injury wants to let people know how hard it is to move around in this town in a wheelchair, and that when the snow plows go down to the corners, and to your point, Eleanor, the sidewalks can make someone almost fall out, and then you can't get down the corners because the snow plows have gone through and blocked all this stuff. So I'd like us also, when we're thinking about stuff, to think about people who have other issues that prevent them from walking when we're doing this.
Equity has many dimensions, and age is one of them that we oft overlook. that does bring us to the end of our time for questions. And I'd like to give each of you, after your eloquent presentations here tonight, and thank you so much for that, a minute to wind up and give a final pitch to the voters of your ward as to why they should choose you. Because while we have 4 intelligent and dedicated people appearing here tonight, in a few weeks, voters will have to select one box and only one box, or one oval and only one oval. So Mary, why don't you start off, and in 1 minute, tell us why you are the best person to be the alderman for the 7th Ward for the next 4 years.
Okay, I think I am, because I have for the last 25 years been rolling up my sleeves and showing up. And I think that effective change handles by people who don't have any expectation of anything other than they care about making their community better. I have a wealth of experience through my real estate. I know how to negotiate. I know how to ask questions, because that's my life. I am very, very committed to this community, and I've shown it in my actions. So I think, and I'm very approachable. Well, I like to think I am in any case. But I do also want to bring out a couple points that were brought up that didn't. I think, we need to look at TIFs, because $85 million or $185 million have gone through TIFs in the last 37 years that never made it to schools. Second of all, when we talk about Northwestern and how much they give us, I think there's equality there, but it's a mutual thing. We don't charge Northwestern to come in and come to our schools either. There are students get to use our schools. And I think that this is what a symbiotic relationship is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Katie Trippy, you want to be alderman for the next 4 years of the 6th Ward. Why are you the person that voters should choose instead of the incumbent Alderman Tom Sufford?
Well, I think that I am energetic and a people person. I'm looking forward to taking on this new role. It will be brand new to me. I've spent some time in public service as a campaign manager and things like that, but never as a candidate. And I've never been elected to public office. I'm looking forward to serving. I'm excited about what lays ahead as we have the ability to rebuild after this pandemic. All of our social and political and economic structures through using a lens of equity. I think it's an opportunity that's once in a lifetime, and I look forward to leading.
Thank you. Eleanor, Alderman Revell, why should the voters of the 7th Ward re-elect you for the next 4 years?
Well, I believe that I've been a very responsive alderman, answering residents' questions and connecting them with city services, making sure they understand the policies that we make and why we have the rules that we have. And I would like to continue to be that responsive alderman for my residents. And I also think I bring some expertise, both that I had coming into the office and then that I've gained while being alderman. And I want to use that expertise to continue to work on the affordable housing issue, to continue to advocate strongly for implementation of our climate action and resilience plan. And then also, I'm really committed to making sure that our alternative emergency response program gets off to a good start, and that I think it's going to take some monitoring over the next couple of years to make sure we get it right. I want to be there to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Alderman. Tom Sufford, why should voters re-elect you to represent the 6th Ward in the City Council of Evanston for the next 4 years?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I've spent the last 4 years being a fierce advocate for the residents of my ward, making it clear that I will push back against staff and against my fellow aldermen when they want to make decisions that are contrary to the best interest of the people I represent. I'm interested in what's best for all of Evanston. We have a lot of work left to do. We have a lot that has been left undone by this council that needs to get fixed. And I'm excited about working with a new mayor who's a resident of the 6th Ward and making everything in Evanston better and more affordable for everyone.
Well, thank you so much. Let me remind all of you that you have the freedom to post on the Central Street Neighbors website I'm willing to discuss with any of you, as is the Central Street Neighbors Board, opportunities for other ways to get message out. I think everybody would like to see a little more participation than perhaps we saw in the round of mayoral voting for this upcoming election. And I just want to conclude by thanking you all for taking the time to appear. It was, I think, a thought-provoking discussion. I hope it was worth your time. I hope it was worth the time of everybody who took the time to view in. And we will be making it available as a video, and you are free to use it as long as you pledge to play fair, not decontextualize and make people say things that they didn't mean to say. And my final note is thank all four of you for not using the T word once during this debate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks,
Thank
Megan.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jim.
guys.
Good night.
Everyone.